The paper had barely touched the counter when Officer Brantley tore it straight down the middle. Then he tore it again, laughed, and dropped the pieces into the trash as if they were worthless. Across the busy police station lobby, dozens of eyes turned toward the black single father standing silently in front of him, his worn leather workbag hanging from one shoulder and his 6-year-old daughter's lunchbox tucked beneath his arm. Nobody knew that by sunset, the same officers laughing behind that desk would be standing in perfect formation, saluting the man they had humiliated. If you believe kindness, courage, and second chances can change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is carrying a story powerful enough to change an entire room. It was a bright Tuesday morning in the city of Belhaven, with sunlight pouring through the tall glass windows of the police station and turning the polished floors almost golden. The lobby was crowded with people waiting for reports, officers moving between desks, phones ringing, and printers humming. In the middle of all that noise stood Malachi Reed, a 41-year-old single father who worked long shifts repairing commercial elevators. His shirt was neatly pressed, but the sleeves showed faint marks from years of physical work. He had come directly from his daughter's school because he could not afford to miss another hour at work. His daughter, Nia, had been waiting outside with a neighbor while he tried to solve a problem that had been haunting their family for weeks. Malachi had been trying to report repeated harassment against his elderly mother, who lived alone in a small apartment across town. Someone had been leaving threatening notes on her door, scratching her car, and following her whenever she walked to the grocery store. Malachi had already reported it twice, but nothing had happened. His mother was frightened, and every night she called him before going to bed just to hear his voice. Malachi did not want revenge. He did not want special treatment. He simply wanted someone to take her fear seriously. Officer Brantley, a large veteran officer with a reputation for impatience, glanced over the complaint and sighed. He told Malachi that the department had more important things to deal with and that his mother probably had nothing to worry about. Malachi calmly explained that he had photographs, dates, security footage, and even a witness. Brantley barely looked at the evidence. When Malachi insisted that the complaint be officially recorded, the officer's expression hardened. He grabbed the papers, ripped them apart, and told Malachi that he was wasting everyone's time. The lobby became strangely quiet. A few officers watched from a distance. One shook his head. Another whispered something to his partner. Malachi looked down at the torn pieces of paper scattered across the counter. For a moment, his eyes filled with pain, but he refused to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing him break. He picked up his daughter's lunchbox, straightened his jacket, and quietly said that his mother deserved better. Then he turned toward the door. But before he could leave, something unexpected happened. An older officer standing near the hallway suddenly stepped forward. His name was Chief Everett Calloway, and unlike everyone else in the room, he had heard every word. He had been walking toward his office when he saw the papers being destroyed. The chief did not raise his voice. He simply walked to the trash can, picked up the torn complaint, and carefully placed the pieces on the counter. Then he asked Malachi to tell him everything from the beginning. For the next several minutes, the station became completely still. Malachi explained the threats against his mother, the ignored reports, the photographs, and the footage from a nearby store. Then he mentioned something he had not told anyone before. 3 nights earlier, he had followed the person who had been stalking his mother, not to confront him, but to identify him. Malachi had seen the man enter a vehicle with a police department parking permit hanging from the mirror. Chief Calloway's face changed. He immediately ordered an internal investigation. Security footage was pulled. Access logs were checked. Within hours, investigators discovered that someone inside the department had been using information from police reports to target vulnerable residents. The person responsible was not Brantley, but another officer who had been quietly exploiting the system for months. Malachi's mother had never imagined that the person threatening her might have access to police information. The discovery shook the entire station. But there was another secret Malachi had never mentioned. Years earlier, before becoming a father, he had served his country in a dangerous overseas assignment. He had been trained as a marksman and had saved several members of his unit during an attack. After returning home, he left that life behind because he wanted to raise Nia peacefully. He never wore his old uniform, never displayed his medals, and rarely spoke about those years. To Malachi, being a father mattered more than being called a hero. Chief Calloway eventually learned the truth when he found an old service record connected to Malachi's name. The chief stared at the document for a long moment before walking back into the lobby. Malachi was still there, holding Nia's hand. The chief stepped in front of him and apologized, not as a politician, not as an administrator, but as a man who knew his department had failed someone who had spent his life protecting others. Then the chief turned toward the officers. He ordered every uniformed member of the station to stand. One by one, officers stepped away from their desks. Conversations stopped. Chairs scraped against the floor. Within moments, the entire station stood facing Malachi. Chief Calloway raised his hand in salute. Then every officer followed. The same lobby where Malachi had been laughed at that morning was now filled with the quiet sound of dozens of hands rising to their foreheads in respect. Malachi looked at them, stunned. His daughter squeezed his hand. His eyes became wet, but this time he did not hide it. Chief Calloway told him that courage was not always wearing a uniform or carrying a weapon. Sometimes courage was being a tired father who kept fighting for his family even after being told to give up. Sometimes it was walking into a room where you knew you might be judged and still choosing dignity instead of anger. The investigation eventually led to several disciplinary actions, and Malachi's mother finally received protection. More importantly, the department changed its complaint procedures so no citizen could have a report dismissed or destroyed without proper review. Malachi never asked for an apology from Officer Brantley. He simply told the chief that he hoped the officer learned something from what happened. His daughter still carried that little lunchbox every morning, and Malachi still worked long hours repairing elevators. Nothing about his life suddenly became perfect. But something inside the community had changed. People who once walked past him without noticing began recognizing him as the quiet man who had stood his ground without hatred. And on that bright afternoon, as Malachi walked out of the station with Nia beside him, the sunlight reflected off the glass doors behind them. For the first time in weeks, he felt his shoulders becoming lighter. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment so more people can hear a story about dignity, courage, and the power of doing what is right even when nobody is watching. Special request: comment, respect has no color, if you believe every person deserves to be heard, valued, and treated with dignity. Because sometimes justice does not begin with a courtroom. Sometimes it begins with one ordinary person refusing to give up. And sometimes the person standing quietly at the counter, holding a torn piece of paper, is the very person who reminds an entire room what honor truly means.